Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. If you are here from my TikTok, welcome. And if you're just here because you want to watch this video, welcome again. I hope you guys consider subscribing. A lot of people wanted me to make a tier list for classic literature, so that's what I'm going to do. The tiers are S, A, B, C, D. I'm going to put on your screen in just a second. And I'm just going to be tier ranking some of my favorites, some of my least favorites, and some intermediate, you know what I mean, books. But yeah, anyways, let's just get into the tier ranking. I picked a lot of popular books and a few books that I wanted you guys to know how I felt about them. And so yeah, let's just get into the tier ranking real quick. All right, starting off with a very popular book, I'm going to start with one of my least favorite books of all time, 1984, and we're going to be putting that in the D tier. 1984, I've made a whole video on TikTok about this. I really dislike 1984 because I think it's just such a bland book. Maybe you guys think I'm missing the point when it comes to that, but I just didn't enjoy it whatsoever. I didn't think that the ideas were very revolutionary. I didn't think that the writing was very captivating. I didn't really care about any of the characters. I didn't care about anything that was going on ever. The George Orwell, in my opinion, has pretty bland and not very imaginative prose, again, which you guys might just say it's not supposed to be imaginative, but in my opinion, I like to enjoy what I'm reading when I'm reading it, and even if I'm not supposed to enjoy it, usually I've read books that when you're not supposed to enjoy it, they at least give you something. Like, I just think George Orwell isn't a good writer, and so I don't think that he is able to create writing that will make me be like, okay, wow, yeah, that was a good line. You know what I mean? The only part that I thought that about was the very first line. And other than that, I was not impressed. I was not. Yeah, I really dislike 1984. One of my least favorite books I've ever read. One of my least favorite classics, if not my least favorite classics of all time. Yeah. Anyways, let's get on to one that I like a little bit more. Since we got off to a little bit of a negative note, I want to start with Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. And where should I put this? Should I put this in A or B? I'm gonna put this in A because I really do love Emily Bronte. I think she's a wonderful author. She is so imaginative, like basically the opposite of George Orwell. I feel like she creates such a dark and mysterious and foreboding feeling when you are reading this book in particular, Wuthering Heights. But it's her poetry comes out in her prose, which I find so beautiful, and she is just able to capture such a raw emotional element to life when she's bringing all of these characters and their emotions into the light, and I really enjoyed reading that. I think that what she was able to do with Heathcliff and Catherine and their story and their children's story, I really loved reading it, and I loved following that. And I just, yeah, it's one of my favorite books. Definitely check it out if you haven't read it. I feel like it's a perfect book to read for this time of year. But yeah, it's a wonderful book. And then we're gonna talk about a book that you guys really all like, or at least a book that a lot of you guys like that I know from my TikTok channel, which is going to be The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm also not sure if I'm gonna put this in A or B, but I think I'll have to put it in A just because it was one of my first really big classics that I read. It had a big impact on me. It was one of my favorite books ever for a long time. It really was able to show me how fun and fast paced these longer books are. This is like the first time I really ventured into like a really long book other than a Dostoevsky, which there's a little bit of Dostoevsky on this as well. But if you have read Dostoevsky, you know that his books aren't necessarily fast paced. And then I read this book. I was not expecting anything fast paced, and then this book really got me into like, okay, wow, yeah, this is an awesome time reading this, and I really enjoyed it. I got through it super fast. I took it everywhere with me. You know, when you take a book with you a lot of different places, I feel like it makes the experience more personal. At least for me, like when I am carrying a book around, I feel like it's a more emotionally, like personal feeling when you finish that book and what you think about that book. And this was a book that I took around literally everywhere. I could not like not bring it everywhere I went. You know what I mean? Family vacations, school, work, everywhere. You know what I mean? It was a really fun time. I listened to it, I read it, yeah, like I drove to a long ways away and I literally listened to it the whole entire time because I just couldn't stop reading it because it was so fun. And yeah, I really liked that book. I think that my appreciation for it has maybe gone down just a little bit due to like time. But I do think that is still one of my favorites ever. And by the way, I'm not going to be ordering it. Like, I'm not saying that Wuthering Heights is better or worse. I'm just saying this is just like the order in which I bring them up. So yeah, next up, let's bring up one of my favorite books of all time. It's going to be Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. This is absolutely a life-changing experience for me. This is one of, if not my favorite books of all time. It is such an epic masterpiece. I can't imagine reading anything that will make me feel more familiar with the characters. I mean, Tolstoy got really close. No Tolstoy on this list. Sorry about that. Jane Austen got really close, and there is a Jane Austen book on this list. But I just really enjoyed, and like I had such an emotional attachment to Les Mis, especially towards the end. I remember I read it because my mom really loves the book and she loves the play a lot as well. And so I just decided, I didn't really have anything to read, and you know what I mean? I got done reading I think I got done reading maybe East of Eden or something like that. And I was like, well, I don't really know what to read. Let me read Les Mis because my mom really likes this book. So I picked it up and it was a life-changing experience. I can't even describe or put into words like how much it meant to me at the time. The characters from Eponine to Jean Valjean to Javert to Cosette, everything, you know what I mean? Like I named my car Cosette just because I love Les Mis so much. It's just such an awesome story. Finishing the book just made me want to consume every single possible rendition of it, and I watched the movie, which is all right. I watched the play, which made me cry like a lot. So it's just a really wonderful I think story, and I think that everyone should be able to read it because it's just such a life-changing experience to go through. I really have not enough words, not enough good things to say to describe Les Mis. It's wonderful. Next up, let's talk about a book that I was recommended to by a lot of my followers over on TikTok, which is Kafka on the Shore. So this book is very imaginative. I'm going to put it in the B tier because I did enjoy this book. I did enjoy this book quite a bit. I think that Murakami is one of my favorite contemporary authors, along with another person on this list who you guys might know if you've watched any of my videos. But I think that Murakami is just a really wonderful writer, and I think his voice is very attractive, in terms of like he really gets the reader, and like the way he tells stories really gets the reader to want to read his books and like want to explore his worlds a lot. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is a very important thing for an author to have. That he especially for beginners. One of my friends started reading Kafka on the Shore, and he like just consumed it so fast, you know what I mean, and like ate every single word. And it was one of his first like novels that he had read since he got out of high school, you know what I mean, and he ended up reading a bunch of his other books because I feel like it just has a very likable voice and tone and style to it, you know what I mean. That being said, it is not one of those books that I think really helped me in like a in like the grand scope of like my life journey. I don't really think that I was very emotionally attached to any of the characters at all. I think it was fun. I think it was cool. I thought it was, like a heartwarming, and like I felt of course emotions reading it, and I was very glad that I got to read it, and I'm happy that I spent time with it, you know what I mean, and got to know it. But at the same time, I wasn't really too like impacted by the end of it, you know what I mean? And so I'm just gonna have to put it in B tier, even though it's a really good book. Next up is it's the Ernest Hemingway book that like changed how I viewed Ernest Hemingway, and that is going to be A Farewell to Arms. I don't know if I should put it in A or B. I think I'll put it in A just because I feel like it had a larger impact on me than Kafka on the Shore did. But it was just such a surreal experience. I had already read The Old Man and the Sea, and I enjoyed The Old Man and the Sea. I know a lot of people really like that book, but I don't mind that book. I think it's a pretty good book, but it wasn't really life changing for me. And then I read The Sun Also Rises, and I just don't think I was in the right headspace to get like an Ernest Hemingway book. Do you know what I mean? And if you have read Ernest Hemingway, you know what I'm talking about here. He has a very unique style to him. He's a very simplistic style about writing. He will use a lot of minimalist features to try and tell a story about how he feels like as a human being, um, and it's all within like a subtext point of view. You know what I mean? And so you are kind of like learning about these characters' feelings through their words, but they're not like saying exactly how they feel. So one example that I always like to point out, or like I guess not an example, but like the format that I've usually noticed is that he will use paragraphs to set up a scene, and then once the scene is set and he has the characters that are going to talk, he lets the characters talk for a long time, a short time, you know what I mean? But it's just basically all dialogue from there until something else happens and he needs to set up another scene. But through that dialogue, you get to like know the characters and learn like how they are like if they're sarcastic, if they're funny, if they're personable, you know, and you get to learn and experience like what type of people they are and how they interact with others, and through those interactions they really, it helps you like learn who they are as characters, if you know what I mean. And so Farewell to Arms really, it like made that idea kind of click in my brain. I don't think it really clicked that well for me when I read The Sun Also Rises, which is why I want to reread that a lot. But when I read The Farewell to Arms, I was like so emotionally touched by it, and I was like, okay, wow, I really, really love this style of writing. I really wish that I had like picked up on this or appreciated this more when I was reading The Sun Also Rises. And yeah, it was just such a wonderful book. I really, really recommend it to anyone who is trying to get into Ernest Hemingway. I think it might be the best one that I've read so far. And yeah, next up, let's get into one that I introduced me to this author who I have been wanting to experience for, or experience more from, for a long time. It's gonna be James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. This was just such a wonderful and emotionally connecting experience, I should say. I might have to actually have to put an 8 here because it was just so personal and just I connected with a lot of the ideas within this book about religion and suppression. And if you don't know, it's about a young African American boy who's I think around 8 to 10 years old maybe, and he lives in Harlem, and it's about him um, like going through his religious experience while also dealing with his sexuality. And I didn't connect to every single part of the story, but I connected to especially the religious part of the story. And I think that it was just so beautifully told, and I'm almost 100% sure that this is like a very autobiographical novel from James Baldwin, and a very personal one at that. And so I feel like this just made me like James Baldwin a lot because I got to know what he thinks and like who he is as a person, and just like what he um, calls his beliefs to be, you know what I mean, and what he believes and how he's not afraid to kind of they say those beliefs. And so yeah, anyways, I really, really like that book. We're gonna go to one of my favorite books of all time, and the first book that I read that really, really impacted me. It's gonna be Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Um, this book, it was like the first classic novel I read, which is like diving into the deep end pretty much. A lot of people start out with Dostoevsky nowadays, and I always think that it might be a little bit of a mistake, even though I did that, just because he's a very very difficult writer just to get into like the headspace for. If you aren't really ready for a Dostoevsky book, I feel like it's not that easy to just kind of dive into one of his books without really knowing what it's about. But I mean, I did that with this book, and I just absolutely love this. I took same with Count of Monte Cristo. I took this everywhere with me. I took this all the way to Japan, where I read a good chunk of this novel, and it was just such a wonderful. I know I've said wonderful a lot, but it was such a touching experience about learning about grief and about guilt and about the human consciousness and what it really, what like the power that it holds is. I think that it is just such a special book, and it's the first book that I read, the first novel that I read that like really changed how I viewed the world, and changed how I viewed myself and my life and my morals and my principles and stuff like that. I really, really, really love this book. It is just, yeah, it's such a special book to me, and yeah, I think everybody should read it. And next up, we're going to talk about one that I haven't read in a long time, which is going to be 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I'm going to put that in B tier just because I haven't read it in a minute, and I think that I think it could benefit off of a reread. What I know about this book is that it is very, or obviously I know a lot about it because I read it, but what I feel about this book is that it is very difficult. One of the more difficult books I've read, but that it's a very personal book to Marquez in particular. I know that there's a lot of things that are hinting to like life experiences that he lived through, or things that he wanted to bring up about colonialism and capitalism, such as like the banana war, not the banana war, but the banana raid or whatever it is called in Colombia. And, and basically, if you haven't read this book, it is about a family in a fictional town called Macondo, and it's the Buendia family. And the reason that it makes this book so difficult is that there's so many different like lineage paths and like families and people that have the same name. So there's like a Colonel Aureliano Buendia, Colonel Aureliano Buendia, Aureliano Buendia. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like they just go on and on and on, and there's a bunch of different names that are exactly the same. And and he is trying to tell a story through these people, and it's really, really. I found it very similar to a book called Things Fall Apart that you guys might have read for like maybe school or something. I found it very like thematically similar to that book, but I think it's a lot better than that book, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think it could easily be in the A tier, but right now I'm going to put it in the B just because I haven't read in a long time, and I think that I would appreciate it more right now if I read it. So yeah, next up, let's go to another one of my favorite books of all time, which is going to be Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Jane Austen is just one of the best I've ever read at creating characters. I've said this in a few of my videos over on TikTok, is that just I think Jane Austen and Tolstoy specifically are two of the best at creating characters. I think that what they're able to do with um, just prose and how they're able to structure their prose in creating a character that feels like a real person, I think is unparalleled. Basically, I haven't really read anyone else that has been able to do something like that. Because the way that Jane Austen uses third person omniscient, but will switch between it like almost switches between first person and third person, but it doesn't exactly do that but it just feels like that's what she's doing, and it's just such a like I think it's such a brilliant way to get you to know what the characters are feeling and be associated with how they're feeling. And I think that her personalities of the characters and the way that she presents them are just so beautiful. And especially this book, I just love the story. I love, I mean, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. Their story really is just such a a beautiful story to follow and to witness. And I think that it is, well, yeah, I think it's the greatest romance of all time. It's my favorite romance ever. So I definitely would recommend it to anybody who hasn't read it. And yeah, I really, really like it. And next book we're going to talk about is The Great Gatsby. And so I was thinking about putting this in D, but I might have to put it in C. Um, I don't like The Great Gatsby either. I'm gonna put it in C. I really, really don't like The Great Gatsby. I think that The Great Gatsby is probably one of my least favorite books of all time still, but I can't put it all the way down in D just because I don't think that it is. I don't think the prose is comparable to George Orwell. I really think George Orwell's prose and his writing style just made me dislike that book so much. Like I could not handle reading 1984. But on the other hand, The Great Gatsby, well, I think that it's pretty lazily thrown together in my opinion. I don't really think that the story is inspirational or meaningful or I don't think that it should be what we look at when we look at the American dream, you know what I mean? I think that like the symbolic, or I guess not symbolic, but the literary techniques that he uses are just like almost non-existent, to the point where the only thing you're ever going to talk about if you have this book in school, or if you're talking about this book with a book club or whatever, is going to be like, okay, the green light, the green light, the green light, the green light. And it's like, okay, that's not the only thing that he does, but it's just like when basically one of the only things that you can point to as like a literary tool that you use to try and portray a message is like the same thing over and over and over throughout the same book or throughout the entire book, I don't really value it at the end of the day. Like I think that it's pretty lazily done. I think that you could have done a better job, and I think that you should have tried to kind of make it a little bit more um like make it a little bit more meaningful. You know what I mean? It just seems like he is trying to be like, okay, yeah, this is what the green light means, and now I'm just going to refer to the green light while telling like a story that is pretty boring for the next 100 pages, 150 pages, and just every once in a while I'm going to mention this green light, and so then when I do that, you're going to know what I'm talking about, and it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but at the same time, it's like, do I really care about what you're talking about? And most of the time, that's a no. And yeah, I don't really love that book. But one book that I do really, really love, and one book that I read recently that really put me onto this author, or made me fall in love with this author, I should say, is going to be 2666 by Roberto Bolaño, my favorite contemporary author of all time. I know that he passed away, but I still count this as contemporary. I mean, this book was only published in English in 2010, so I don't know how it could get more contemporary than that. I guess if it was 2020s, whatever. But I'm going to count this as contemporary, even if it's not. I don't really care. But I just love Roberto Bolaño so much. I think that his writing style is just so unique and so clever and brilliant that it just makes me like fall in love with everything that I've read from him. I've read The Savage Detectives and 2666, and I really like The Savage Detectives, but then I read 2666 and I just was like, okay, wow, this is just such a wonderful, wonderful book. I think that the message behind each part, if you guys don't know, it's about a border town, fictional border town named Santa Teresa, where hundreds of women have been murdered and raped, and it's five different parts of the novel, and they're all about different people, but they don't really all interconnect. Like none of the like a few of the characters appear in the other parts, but not really. You know what I mean? Like they're not really connected that much, but they basically are all focused around this town and have something to do with this town, and it is just it's a very chaotic yet like meaningful and personal experience to read. And I think it's so personal because this was the book that he started after he was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and so he wrote this knowing that he was probably not going to be around for much longer. And I feel like this is just such a like key to understanding like humanity almost. I think that it is just it like brought such peace and loving nature into my like being after I finished it that I just was really astounded by it, and I thought that it was just such a brilliant and wonderful work of fiction. And I think that this is like the novel form heightened to its probably max. You know what I mean? And if you guys know me, you guys know that I really like it when artists or authors or writers bring their medium or whatever form they're working with, and they use that form to tell a story individually, or like they use it to heighten the story that they want to tell. You know what I mean? And I think that when I think that Bolaño is a really really good example of that because he is just so um, like keen and particular when it comes to how he writes stories and how he wants to tell stories, and I really really like that about him. And next one, we're gonna talk about Beloved by Toni Morrison. I do like this book a lot. I think that it was a little bit overhyped for me. Um, I I I read this book very recently. In fact, I read it last month in October. Actually, no, it's December. So I read it 2 months ago. And it was a very good experience. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the message. I enjoyed her writing style and how she is able to make you feel present in that moment and in that setting. I think it's very such like a particular skill that I think Toni Morrison really really has dialed down to like almost perfection. I think that she is really able to do that extremely well. But what I had with it is I didn't really feel connected to the story or to the characters or to what was happening all that much. I think that I was hoping for a little bit more of a meaningful feeling when I was done finishing it, and I just ended up not really having that. But I do definitely want to read more Toni Morrison because I know a lot of people say that this isn't their favorite of hers, and so they like these other ones. Like Toni Morrison is one of those authors where there are a lot of different people who have a lot of different favorites of hers. Do you know what I mean? And so I think I'm just gonna have to read all of her books and see which ones I like the most. But yeah, I'm gonna put Beloved in the B tier. Next up, we're gonna put Blood Meridian in the A tier, and this is a book that I only read recently, and I'm gonna tell you this: this exceeded my expectations because I did not have very high expectations when I coming into Blood Meridian because of the fan base around it, I should say. Not that it's like a negative thing on the book, but just I didn't trust the fan base. Do you know what I mean? The fan base kind of seemed like, okay, yeah, Judge Holden is a really bad dude, and so that means we're gonna put him in edits and just talk about how evil of a person he is all the time. And it's like, okay, yeah, I can respect that, but at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna really value what you guys have to say about this book that much just because you know what I mean? Like, it's not gonna mean that much to me at the end of the day, because I don't really trust that, kind of, like, celebration of a book or whatever, you know what I mean? But I'll tell you what, Cormac McCarthy is a genius. I think that this is one of the most like this is just such a masterpiece. I know Cormac McCarthy is said to have like put how many years, like 10, 15, 20 years into this book. And I think that the allusions to Moby Dick were just so wonderful. I should have put Moby Dick on here, but because I love Moby Dick, if you guys don't know, and I think that the allusions and the references and the inspiration that Cormac McCarthy got from Moby Dick, because I know that that was his favorite novel. I mean, the judge essentially being Moby Dick, I thought was just such a brilliant way to tell a story, and then the contrast or the juxtaposition between Moby Dick being in the ocean, desolate, you know what I mean, alone, drowning, wet, versus Cormac McCarthy putting the story in like the desert, dry, famine, you know what I mean? Like it's just such a good way to juxtapose the two stories while simultaneously telling a pretty similar message, I would say. And I think that Cormac McCarthy told a message that I found to be so clever and brilliant, and I really, really appreciated the book. I don't think that the fans that I was referring to earlier really understand it. I'm not gonna say that like I'm so smart or whatever, do you know what I mean? But like most of them are like 14, 15 years old, and so then it's just like I don't really think that I would have understood that if I was 15 years old. And so I just take it with a grain of salt. I learned to just like not really trust the fan base of a lot of different things, especially like very popular things like Blood Meridian, because this just really exceeded my expectations and I really, really loved it. All right, we have two more, and the first one I'm going to talk about is going to be Animal Farm by George Orwell. I had to put another George Orwell on here because I didn't want to just trash him that much. I don't really like this book either, but I thought it was a little bit more clever and a little bit more well told than 1984. I feel like Animal Farm has a little bit of life in it, a little bit of meaning, a little bit of, you know what I mean, like a little, it has like some imagination to it. Do you know what I mean? And I know 1984 is like a cool concept, cool idea. Of course, you guys are gonna say it has imagination in it, but like, I'm not really talking about imagination as in like how creative it is. More of like, just like what you feel from reading the book. Do you know what I mean? Like I just feel I feel more, you know what I mean? And I can appreciate the allusions and the symbolism and the characterization of all of the animals and all of the farm and all that kind of stuff more about Animal Farm than I can about anything from really 1984. So I just had to put that in there so I wasn't trashing on George Orwell the whole time. Last up, we're going to talk about my favorite book of all time, The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This book was one of my first classic novels. Again, I read this right after I read Crime and Punishment, and it was such a pivotal moment in my entire life. This I actually finished this when um I finished this book I think a day or two after I went on my the first date with my girlfriend. And so just it really just changed how I thought about life and how I thought about religion, how I thought about um, just philosophy as a whole, but also the philosophies that I agreed with and wanted to adopt into my own life. It changed how I treated other people. It changed how I like there. I feel like the easiest way to say this is that there would have been a lot of things that I would have regretted, and that I feel like I would have acted a certain way towards a lot of different things. Um, that I feel like I would like right now. I'm glad that I didn't act that way, and I think that the Brothers Karamazov is a pretty big reason as to why I didn't act that way. I'm sorry if that's pretty vague. I'm just trying not to like trauma dump on you guys, but I feel like this just helped me through a lot of very personal moments in my entire life, in my life, and I think that it was just a a a way to kind of build my emotional understanding of the world, as well as like my spiritual and like a psychological strength. You know what I mean? I feel like Dostoevsky is one of my favorite theologists, philosophers, and psychologists to read, because I feel like he understands all three of those realms very, very well, and I really like to hear what he has to say about it. In this book, just like it blew me away with just how brilliant I thought it was. And yeah, I just really, really, really love this book. And yeah, this is my tier list. These are all the books that I have tier listed. This is a kind of a long video. I know that you guys wanted me to make some longer videos, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully, this is like a good first kind of YouTube video for you guys to enjoy. And yeah, anyways, hopefully you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and please stay safe.